Hey guys, what is going on? Redmash here, and welcome back to another edition of Cards and Castles Meta Monthly, where of course we are going to be going over what I believe are the top 3 meta decks, of course, in a given month. This time looking into the October 2018 to November 2018 season. I know I didn't post one of these videos actually last month. I didn't really think there was enough of a change to justify making a video. However, going into this month and what I've seen out of this month personally, I feel like right now there is enough to justify making another video because there has been a certain shift that I'd like to kind of address. So that being said, we're gonna go ahead and hop into it. Remember, these are just my opinions on what I believe of the meta deck. You guys, of course, can have your own opinions, your own ideas, and I'd love to hear them down in the comment section below. But with that being said, let's go ahead and jump right into deck number 3 on this edition of Meta Monthly. Alright, so the first deck I want to talk about is Traps. Now, obviously, normally I would have a Trap deck kind of illustrated below me to kind of show you guys what a normal layout of the Trap decks might look like. However, I don't really find myself a strong Trap player, nor do I really enjoy playing Traps, because they don't really feel good personally to kind of play. They're sort of mindless, in my opinion. You kind of just have a dojo out, you place a few traps, you draw, and then make sure you can push a few units down a lane to threaten your opponent, force them to maybe trigger said traps, and, the cycle kind of repeats. But normally, obviously, you'll see the dojo, you'll see a couple of strong traps, but there is a certain aspect of these trap decks that have been becoming more popular lately, and I feel like that's why traps are getting a slight resurgence. I mean, they've been around for a while now, but have kind of stayed under the radar here and there. You'll see a few trap decks. You'll see trap decks pop up previously in a couple of the early fall, late summer months. They weren't hugely annoying, but they still were kind of aggravating at points. But I wouldn't say they were as high. I mean, I might be wrong that's just in my opinion that they weren't super strong a few months ago, but now they're certainly getting a bit of a resurgence, in my opinion, and that's again primarily due to something we'll talk about in a second. But I do want to quickly touch up on the fact that I've noticed another variant of trap decks kind of emerging. Well, I do think the purple-blue variant is stronger, and I think might be more reliable to work with. I will have to give props to the fact that a couple of Ninja Warlock trap decks have started to emerge alongside them as well, or they've always been around with the purple blue, but they've taken a back seat. They kind of just were stuck in the back there, yeah, you guys exist, but we're the main trap deck. So I think right now there's a bit of a competition for what is a main trap deck, although I will think, or at least I do think, that the blue-purple variant will overcome them. Not to say, again, that they don't deserve some props, though. Cards like Detonate, Flame of Eternity, obviously in the Warlock faction, they're alright traps, but I think the Might of the Minotaur and the Avalanche do a bit more. Because Detonate, you kind of have to get close to face to hopefully utilize this. And then, of course, Flame of Eternity, you most likely get some success out of this one, but, again, harder to get some value in the later stage. I mean, maybe even not. I mean, it's 4 damage directly from a summon, and that could, that's pretty much a blue firebolt right there. But I will say that I think the Might of the Minotaur and the Avalanche do a bit more. Not to say, again, that these cards aren't bad, but we will talk about the main point in why some of these trap decks have resurged, in my opinion. Lately, we've been seeing a bit more ninja shenanigans with these traps, and of course, they've been around with the trap decks because it makes sense to include him. But I think Magic Eater is just really more of a pain in the ass now to deal with, especially because of what else is being run within the trap decks. Not only do you have the Magic Eater, but with trap decks you also can carry things like Lightning. That's a ninjas. The Lightning Blade, which I think not a lot of traps run, but I think maybe they should start considering maybe at least 2 copies of. You running things like Multi-Strike, which a big offender and a pain in the ass to a lot of people, sometimes being thrown into decks that, revolve around multi-strike, not even really being a trap deck. So, cards like multi-strike, a lightning blade, lunging attack even, cards that are giving the trap decks that extra push they need, I think, to overcome a lot of what they previously struggled against. And to not, that's not to say that they still don't struggle. Of course, you have to be able to successfully draw these cards and activate your traps, because a main way to get around trap decks, in my opinion, is just not really putting too much of an emphasis on hitting the units. Of course, if you end up rushing face, the trap decks will have to respond, with their few units that they have, and not being able to play their traps afterwards can certainly be a bit of a pain in the ass. Especially because sometimes a lot of trap decks like to dedicate at least maybe a quarter of their deck, I want to say, to kind of trap support, whether that be the dojo, and a couple traps, plus the trapdoor ninja. So they dedicate a good portion of the deck to the traps. So once you kind of force them to utilize what remaining units they have, it's going to be tough for trap decks to activate their traps and thereby, activating their dojo, etc., etc. But cards like Multi-Strike, Magic Eater, Lunging Attack, I think those are being seen a bit more often. People are starting to realize that that's going to be what their trap decks are based around. Not really being able to cycle traps, but like what do those traps, or what can those traps end up building up to? And in this case, it's going to be a bit of Magic Eater shenanigans. And not to say Magic Eater alone, I would say Multi-Strike is probably a main contender up there. More so than really Lightning Blade. Lightning Blade is kind of just like one of the cards I kind of thought of that I imagine can be run within the blue-purple, because you do have chain opportunity within the blue. So it makes sense to maybe toss in a Lightning Blade or two if you want to be experimental with that. But obviously, Multi-Strike, Magic Eater, kind of main offenders to the trap decks. I will say that they are kind of successfully put to a halt by some of the decks that, the higher up decks that are on this list. But in my opinion, some of the other decks that they just don't have the capability to remove Magic Eater right away. And when Magic Eater starts building up, and building and building little by little, it's very hard to kind of get rid of him because of how beefy he becomes so fast. It's not like Andrew, where you have to let a unit die for him to start gaining stats. It's just kind of play this, he gets a stat. Play that, he gets a stat. It's, it's very snowball-like effect. But with that being said, that's kind of my take on the trap decks in the number 3 slot. Still decent, but like I said, a bit of a resurgence, although not really much. You can't really classify it as a resurgence. They've been around for quite a while now, and they really haven't really lost their place, like I said, in the beginning of this segment. But with that being said, we can probably move on to deck number 2 then. So let's go ahead and jump right into that. Alright. So, the second deck I want to talk to you guys about is one that I think might stir up a bit of a disagreement within the comment section, but I think that's okay, because of course discussion is great on topics like these, and I feel like overall, the Crusader Warlocks have actually been seen as slightly stronger now, whether or not it's a dedicated Last Will deck, or even a good stuff deck, because we've started to see a bit more of those pop up now, regardless of, whatever deck that is, they still have some very, very strong qualities to them that kind of outrank them over the trap decks and some of the other old previous meta decks, like the Fenrir Scope decks, or the Druid Pirate decks, for those of you who are keeping track. I think that this deck kind of surpasses them, and again, you might be able to disagree with me on that, and that's fine, I respect that. But in my opinion, these colors are just slightly stronger. You've got direct damage from Flamestorm, Blue Firebolt, Disintegrate, Chaotic Storm, Defective Flame Cannon. Even though you don't necessarily have to use them, they still exist within those factions. And you, of course, got some great draw from cards like Divine Knowledge. I'm trying to think of what other good draws people run. Dwarven Archives is iffy because, sometimes those run more dwarf decks. Dragon Crest Shield, that's the card I was thinking of. That's an incredible draw card, especially for when you want to keep things alive or when you're pushing big threats. I know I've experimented with this card particularly in my Beasts of Red Cloak deck, and I find it to be very successful because that, the entire purpose of that deck is keeping things alive. So when you pair it with Dragon Crest Shield, it makes it, you know, a bigger threat, and whenever the enemy hits it, you are of course getting more and more tools to work with. But regardless, going back to the Crusader Warlocks, they are just really strong, you know, I think generally, and much stronger than trap decks, because again, that burn damage can hit things like the Dojo, the Eater, unless they're running Mystic Pact to protect their Magic Eater, which some people have done, by the way. I really don't think the trap decks do all too well against direct damage decks, because they can, you know, easily just burn targets, move forward, and put pressure on face, and trap decks don't necessarily like that. They don't like being hit in the face, because then they have to divert resources that they would have, you know, used for trap triggers, or at least, you know, traps, you know, or trap targets, I guess that makes sense. Trap targets. And like I said, these decks can either be, you know, Last Will dedicated, which I have, or at least I'm showcasing right here, or good stuff decks where, you know, they don't have to run necessarily Last Will dedication. They'll throw in, of course, some Last Will support like Tarius Files, maybe Salahar Rider. I know those are popular in these colors. What else? I've seen Keeper of the Doorway in some of these decks as well. People like that. Those undead units to the hand, they like that a lot. So, I mean, regardless, I think they're just a stronger faction over traps, and over the pirate druid for the same kind of reason. They can burn things, and, you know, depending on what kind of deck it might be, cards like Armory, Blacksmith, making the unit stronger, which is not to say that you can't throw that in a trap deck. It is harder to run in a trap deck, and not to say that you can't run that in the pirate druids, although people don't, you know, that's more of a preference than a necessity for some players. They don't like Armory or Blacksmith, or they don't like both for some reason, which is a bit strange to me. Regardless, again, I keep saying regardless. I just think these are much stronger colors to work with, especially over traps, because you've got heals, draw, burns, all the things you need to make a successful deck work. And of course, they do have contendership though, which we'll get into in just a moment as we look at our number one deck. But, you know, kind of on a last word, I think a lot of people thought that at least these colors were not going to be as strong thanks to some of the recent nerfs, and of course referring back to in August. But I think people are really adjusting to those changes and now are finding comfortable lists to utilize these colors, which is a nice thing to see, because, you know, they've been out of the loop for a little while. Not really too, well, the good stuff has been. The Last Will has been around for a while, but it's nice to see a little bit of the good stuff pop in here and there. But regardless, we're going to move on. There I go again. We're going to move on to deck number one now. The deck I think has really taken over in the season of October-November 2018. And that deck, I believe, or at least is, the Pirate Crusader decks that are running around. Now, primarily there are two variants of these decks that I see mostly. It's either good stuff or school-based decks. Now, in my opinion, I feel like the good stuff decks are a bit stronger because they don't have to solely rely on the School of Knowledge decks, although with the school and with the estate that kind of comes with it, you do get the excuse to run Dramonth, which I've been seeing a bit more recently, which is quite surprising, seeing as how he is, of course, an investment to play, and I mean, props to you if you run Dramonth. I'm not really the one who runs Dramonth. I feel like the good stuff is just a bit more reliable because I'm not solely dependent on the School of Knowledge. Not to say that the decks, or at least the school decks are, but I feel like the good stuff feels better to run, in my opinion, than school-based decks. But regardless, what makes them so much stronger? Well, it's the fact that, of course, Pirates didn't really get hit in the August patch. Of course, you guys know this fact already. Cards like Scope and Voyager didn't really get affected, which people were a bit irritated about. Not to mention Troll Gunner getting a nice stat buff to 4/5 at 5 gold, making him a deadly range unit. A bit more deadlier than the Cannoneer, since you actually get some treasure along with the Troll Gunner being, giving him, excuse me, the ability to ramp out into a couple of bigger units in later turns, like maybe, I don't know, turn 6 cracks if you have enough gold. But regardless, what else? Because I mean, like, that's kind of just the overview of probably the three main problems people have with the deck: Voyager, Troll Gunner, and Scope. But I will say that these decks do a great job in kind of, you know, doing what they do best, ramping out big stuff early on. big stuff early on to overwhelm your opponent. God, that was rough. And so of course, cards like Grendel, Minotaur for the Voyager buff you'll see in here. Arbiter's Return for some amazing heals. Captain for early ramp. Scope to be a pain in the ass. Cards like that, all, when you put them together, that was the second time I did that. And I know someone's going to call me on that in the comments. Probably. I know. It hurt me too. It hurt me inside too. But I think I lost track where I was. I was describing the problem cards, I believe, right? Captain, Voyager. Yeah, I mean, they're just essentially cards that when put together, they're just a nuisance that people want to deal with. And of course, this has been more prevalent over the Scope Fenrir, I think, because of the reliability in draw and heal that you get from Crusaders. Not to mention that you can't get Troll Gunner and Scope and Captain, not in the Druid deck. I just think it fits better here because you have a couple more threats to work your way out into. With Crusaders, you have, like I mentioned, Dremoth, Craxus. You can bring on even early Arbiter if you so need it. Meanwhile, in Druid, you get, of course, Call for Aid, which is a nice card. Fenrir, which is really the scope target that you want to equip that, scope onto. Yeah, that made English sense, right? I don't know. It's cold out, guys. Don't blame me too much. Anyway, so yeah, I mean that's pretty much why I think. I mean, I might not be I might not be doing a good job at elaborating all of this. In words, I'm not really a proficient, speaker when it comes to that. But I just think with all of the elements that are included here, and you could, even think about it with the drawing route with school, of course, when you throw that into the deck, creating a more ramp-based deck, you're going to be seeing cards like Minotaur, Craxus, Mordok, Grendel, so much more earlier. And of course, them being harder to deal with since your opponent doesn't have that much gold to counter them, makes this deck just very successful, whether you're using the good stuff or the school variation. In my opinion, just a strong faction color combination overall. Now, with that being said, guys, that's going to do it for this edition of Meta Monthly. Again, might have given a choppy explanation as to why I think Crusaders are meta. But of course, if you want to kind of help me reinforce that idea, you can go ahead and leave your comments down below. Or if you disagree with my choices, again, leave a comment down below illustrating your thoughts on what you believe are the top 3 Meta Monthly decks of the season. And if you guys did enjoy the video, be sure to give it a like, share with your friends, and comment down below, like I said already. But while you're down there, if you haven't done so already, be sure to hit that subscribe button. Help show your support the channel. Help us grow by clicking that subscribe button at no additional cost to you. And of course, follow us on the new rebranded Twitch channel, which again you can find in the description too, down in the description. We'll be doing streams very, very soon, so of course, be sure to follow that channel to know when I go live. But with that being said, guys, that's going to do it for me for now. So until next time, stay gaming.